Live from Jefferson City, it's the This Week in Missouri Politics Midweek Update with Scott Faughn.
Welcome into This Week in Missouri Politics Midweek Update. This week we are joined by the Dean of the Missouri Republican Party, David Barclage. David, thank you for the time. So we start off with obviously making fun of you. We had you on, and you predicted doom and gloom for the Republicans. I mean, you couldn't have set expectations lower. Honestly, there's a difference between expectation setting and then getting the expectations set so low that you look super wrong. I think you might have flirted with the second one this time.
Well, you always want to overperform expectations, but I have to say,
Box checked.
The problem with polling is that the polling statistically is accurate. Everybody wants to talk about how it's not, but the basis of which the polling is built on, in other words, their model of who they think the electorate is, that's something that's been a little more elusive in American politics. And the overperformance of Donald Trump in northern states, Wisconsin, Michigan, those were absolutely a surprise. Nevada, Pennsylvania is still, even though he's won it, they're still trying to contest it. And so I was right in the fact that if it came down to Pennsylvania, we'd still be wondering about it. And I did get a call from a pollster that North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona was done, but I didn't see those northern states coming. And again, I think the really intuitive thing was the sports guy that are these guys that were sort of the bookmakers who predicted Trump was going to win before everybody else. I think because they're so dispassionate about politics that they were maybe able to read things better because they weren't putting any kind of bias in it because they didn't really have one way or another. But I got to say, it definitely signals a whole lot of things this election. And I just thought the Democrat money and organization, because, I mean, look, Scott, this is the first time Republicans embraced early voting. Who saw that coming finally, that Republicans said early voting's probably going to be good for us, like motor voter?
I think it is. We got a little breaking news, actually. MoDOT, the Missouri Highway Transportation Department, has just officially went D+. They have announced a new director. It's just some random guy at MoDOT. It is a guy from the I-70 corridor, which I know you live on now, but you didn't during the 15-year plan. What is this guy's name? Like if Mr. Burns was an engineer, I don't even know his name. I mean, wow, did MoDOT find a way to shit the bed?
Yeah, I think
Ed Harbinger. Wow. Just a total 0 on 10. Damn.
Look, I think, Scott, you and I both, I think we come to the same deal that MoDOT has been given some real opportunities back in the 90s.
Opportunities now. And I know who gave them to him.
Yeah. And they spit in the legislature last time. The legislature went over the voters to give them money, and a lot of good legislators have been punished for that sin repeatedly.
I'm watching this live stream. It's like C+, high-fiving C-. If you all want to watch this live stream, it's worth watching. If you could encapsulate C- in one picture, it would be this announcement. It is maybe, and I can't hear it, but visually the least impressive thing maybe I've ever seen. It's probably, I assume, like a first date with me, what the woman's expression is. That would be this picture. Wow. I mean, you talk about failing. I mean, you'd have to work hard to be this bad at something. They have had, I mean, it's crazy. MoDOT has had so much success. I mean, if you could just put a double bird to Cindy O'Loughlin, it would be Today by MoDOT. And I don't know that anybody wants to be on her shit list, but I guess MoDOT's dying to be.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I think they had an opportunity to really do something, and they did the opposite.
This is nothing. This is doing nothing.
And look, the people that stood up for them the most, got stung the last
Who
time.
would stand up for these people
MoDOT.
now? Well, you'd have to be an idiot.
And the problem is, the only reason you stand up is because the safety of roads, the economic viability that they create on roads is so important. But my God, talk about stepping on your body part.
It'd have to be longer, I think, for them to step on it. But yes, they might have shut it in a door. Well, it's a funny thing. I mean, I do think if you start tracing the dots, you know, conservation has their own money, but they also have deer season that people actually like. MoDOT has been very popular. A lot of that popularity is based off appropriations from the legislature. Wow, who wants to be the MoDOT guy in the legislature now? What kind of idiot would stick up for that? I mean, this is just, God, every time you sit and watch it, it just gets weaker. I mean, I guess it's good news for like Iowa, Arkansas, Kansas, but wow. I mean, they had a shot to do something great, and they decided to go the opposite direction. Damn. What about...
take exception even when that comes. If you're Arkansas, Iowa, Kansas, and you can't get anything connected to your roads, and they just dead end when they come to Missouri, that's not probably a good thing for them either.
You know, fair point. But the question I have, I think we have a few times, is Mike Kehoe, in ads that I have a feeling you had something to do with, looked Missourians in the face, in the camera, and said, "I'll end wokeism." Any wokeism at MoDOT?
You know, that's an interesting thing.
Can you get on that? I was just curious about that.
I'll look right into it.
Because, I mean, if there is, and you're promoting just some random guy in house, that could get a little weird. But I did see a guy that you know, David Wassinger. He has told folks he's going to drain the swamp. Do you think he starts at MoDOT, or where do you think he starts draining?
Well, I hope he starts draining at the right place, maybe Department of Insurance, MoDOT, some other places. But instead, he thinks it's swampish that you ask members to raise money for other members. And to that extent, the whole concept that the HRCC is a swamp when it's basically a vessel to take from incumbents.
Let's make sure everybody knows what we're talking about here. Sunday night. So John Patterson is the floor leader. He was elected speaker designee a year ago in a couple months. He was reaffirmed last week by his caucus to be the speaker. Sunday night, Justin Sparks announced a run. A guy from your neck of the woods, St. Louisan, announced he was going to challenge the speaker. And in that, got an endorsement from his fellow St. Louisan, David Wassinger.
Yeah, well, he did, and I guess it's a rookie mistake on Wassinger because he doesn't know what he's talking about. And if he's watching this, he can give me a call and I'll explain it to him in no uncertain terms. But, and yeah, I'm a little testy because, I had helped build HRCC back when we were a minority and had Democrats investigating, following, threatening, everything else to derail the organization. And in fact, it was Mark Richardson and others.
You and Mark Richardson. I just got my Mark Richardson picture ready. I was hoping you would do the shout out.
Yeah, Mark Richardson, was the innovator behind that. I remember he goes, "David, I don't know what we can do, but I'm in." And I remember him at fundraising meeting and everything else, and the money wasn't for him. It wasn't for his buddies. It all went right back into campaigns to get a majority, to keep a majority. And if David Wassinger values the majority, he needs to understand that everybody can't write a $3 or $4 million check and buy a race, that a lot of people actually are hardworking men and women who depend on the system of contributions from other patriots to help them get elected so that they can get their message out and people know where they stand rather than hear what the Democrats say you stand for.
Well, and this is a system that's been used by Newt Gingrich, Mike Johnson. I mean, I don't know that, I understand fundraising is hard. I do get that. And it's harder when you maybe seek attention more than you seek legislative victories. But I do think two things. One, this is a system that's been used a long time. Now, he said it was written down in an envelope. I have no idea. That may be accurate. That may not be. But even if it
And
was,
I'm looking at envelopes
who
on my
cares?
desk. I'm looking at envelopes on my desk from the Salvation Army, Boy Scouts. All of them have requests from Donald Trump.
That's true. Yeah.
Requests. They've got a number in them. Wow, that's the swamp. Why don't David, you go out and Justin, let's attack Donald Trump, the Salvation Army, and Boy Scouts today because they put in an envelope a number as well.
Well, the swamp thing is interesting because when you run for office and I saw all 5 statewide Missouri's state government statewide candidates all together. I mean, on that stage you had a Denny Hoskins who is a longtime House member in House leadership, 8 years in the state Senate, going to now continue his career in government service. You have Mike Kehoe that ran MoDOT back when they hired quality directors that kind of inspired confidence. Served 8 years in the state Senate, 6 years in the executive branch, and now is going to continue as governor. What part of the swamp did Denny and Kehoe miss?
Well, I guess if you're from Wildwood and you've got like a 75% Republican district and never met a Democrat, a member of the minority, or anybody else unless you stopped, frisked them, and just for the hell of it, I guess maybe you wouldn't understand it. So maybe
are you saying there was frisks happening in Eureka? Is that what you're saying?
Something like that. Look,
the Eurekan frisks.
They're a little more probing. I don't know. I don't know if I've even met Justin Sparks, so I don't have a particular opinion. I can only judge him by his actions and reputation. I don't think he has the reputation to get elected speaker. I think that it seems to be more about him. There is, look at it, Scott. The House sets up the election of speaker not because it's swampish, but because continuity. We have seen a lot of things become problematic because you don't have a speaker and a majority leader talking. You don't have continuity. You don't have training for members and others at a level that you need so that people can make those independent decisions. Electing a speaker a year in advance allows that person to start to get trained, prepared, so that they can be a better speaker and serve the House. It's not meant for any other reason. And for him to try to take each of these things, each of these rules, each of these reasons, and turn it in to a simplistic argument that serves his own cause should lead most members to believe that it's not really about changing the system for the good. And I think the system can always be changed for the good. It's more about him wanting to be speaker in a power move. So
I think that's always the case. But David, I think there's two different discussions there. One, holding the speaker designee race a year and a fourth before the speaker vote in the House is one thing. I think you could make arguments on both sides of that's a good idea or a bad idea. I think it served the caucus pretty well, but I see the point on that. But that's different than saying, hey, the next time we do this, we should do this closer to the actual election. I think you could make that case. But saying I'm going to run here at the last hour, let's just practically look at it. I think, most members, the overwhelming majority, have committed their vote to Patterson. Now, you might get some votes to go back on their word, and I'm sure you can get a few. But also, Sparks is a freshman. I think it makes it very hard for everyone else that might see themselves or an ally of theirs as being speaker to lock in a speaker for 6 years. I just think practically the votes aren't there. I mean, I see less than 5% chance of John Patterson being defeated by Justin Sparks. However, what is the potential for? I mean, if you got 30 votes, you could conceivably do a deal with the Democrats and block Patterson. I don't know that you could elect one of those 30. That seems like there's only one man in the state that's ever pulled that kind of move off, and it's Mark Richardson. I do see, though, to me, the likely outcome is you have 8 to 10 folks that decide they want to, derail Republican policies and the Republican leadership, kind of come together as the malcontent caucus. And I think that's a problem for Patterson. I mean, I think that's something he's going to have to be a thorn in his side the next 2 years.
I'll say this. There's an old Irish saying that if I can't turn their heart, may the Lord turn their ankles so I'll know them by their limp. I like the idea I like the idea that these malcontents out themselves early so they can be dealt with, because malcontents that turn over the Republican Party to Democrat cohorts are no Republicans. If you want to talk about the true rhinos, they're the people that sabotage the party and set the party up to be to have the Democrats prey on it and divide it. To that regard, I want to point out another good one, and that's Missouri Right to Life. Let's give them accolades for stepping in this for Jordan. I mean, for Jordan Sparks, for whatever this Sparks is. They're making calls out there. I remember when I confronted them when we had a Republican minority and said, would you please rate the vote for speaker? Because you were having all these Democrats vote for a pro-choice speaker. And they said, if we did that, we wouldn't endorse any Democrats. We can't do that. Yet today, they're out trying to derail a speaker when years ago they wouldn't. And it's the same shit. What's even more disturbing is, Scott, I would argue this is pretty much cultural conservative Democrats. We ought to put a new term, and I've got to think of an acronym for them. Culturally conservative Democrats who claim to be Republicans. There ought to be a new label for them, because what they do is they are the ones who are racist. They're the ones who are bigoted. They're the ones who are unreasonable, like Missouri Right to Life. And they try to act like Republicans and force Republicans down ideological, unbending paths that are only destructive, while then applying, different norms. I sort of look at like Jane Duker. Jane Duker's pro-cop, but she's still a woke Democrat. And you forget that, and she'll push you all the way down to do something for the cops that turns out to bite you in the butt. And then she'll criticize Republicans because she's not one. But people forget that because she's pro-cop.
Well, and if she thinks no one's listening, she'll criticize everyone.
Well, that's fine. But all I'm saying is that there's an element to our party of people who claim to be the most Republican that are culturally conservative. They hate Republicans in their heart. They just want what they want, and they don't mind blowing up the party to get it. I think Justin is probably one of those. He probably has a Democrat card somewhere under his pillow that he hides, that he kept all his life until more recently when he ran for office.
Well, practically speaking, you've watched a lot of this is a unique thing from what I've seen, someone announcing at this late hour. But, I mean, practically speaking, do you think this actually gets to a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives in January? Do you think he takes it that far? I'm pessimistic.
I think you've learned by my predictions where I stand sort of on things. I never thought that the Freedom Caucus in D.C. would force Speaker McCarthy out, which that's one issue, but then to literally hold the entire Republican Congress at risk because of their whims. So I am cautious about it. I think that the problem, his argument is that John Patterson just raised a lot of money for candidates that are now being asked to vote against John Patterson for raising money for candidates.
It seems like a hell of a time to attack HRCC when they had one of their most successful nights in the history of the Republican Party. I understand, but bad timing.
Yeah, and look, these members, they're going to have to say is that, well, I benefit. I never could have raised that money against the Democrats. And so is it really bad that an incumbent was asked to give money that when an incumbent wants to look, you and I both know. I mean, it's like, okay, call this swamp. Bill Eigel, who I like, and I'll say this, I don't have the same view of Bill Eigel as many people do. I like
I'm
Bill.
with you on that.
And I think he is very, pragmatic. He's very, a great speaker. He's got many great attributes.
Bill Eigel's a good leader.
But is Bill Eigel part of the swamp because he wants a committee chairmanship that helps him raise money? I think that's common sense. If someone is in a district that's competitive, or someone who has very strong positions and is not willing to compromise them, wants leadership to give them a position to raise money, so be it. That's not swampish. That's just pragmatic. And to the extent that they're asked to give some of that money to help colleagues, that I remember Betty Sims, the senator from Ladue. Ladue, it was about $120,000 income per household. In the Boot Hill, same time, about $17,000 per household, because she couldn't understand why Bill Foster couldn't finance his own race, why we had to raise money for it. And I showed her those numbers. She never complained again. So I just don't have a lot of great respect for someone that bastardizes something that isn't swampish for the purpose of getting an election. But, I've been in politics, so shame on me to be bothered by that.
But just, conceptually, I'm pessimistic this actually goes to a vote on the House floor. But let's say how many members, and by the way, I've had 7 members text me since we've been on the air saying preach and that you're spot on in your assessment there. Okay, that's 8 now. None of them are agreeing with my MoDOT take yet. They're only just talking, I guess because you're talking about them, and I know House members. But go on Facebook and say they support him. That's at what number is that problematic for Speaker Patterson and the rest of the caucus? Is it 10?
Well, you do the math. The Democrats would love to see enough. I don't think it's problematic at 10. Even 15, I think, is gettable, especially with Missouri Right to Life and some others pitching in.
I think John Patterson will be
but
Speaker,
my
but
read,
where does he get?
Well, let me ask you this. Even the most problematic member, I think you're right. I think probably 8 or 10, maybe he gets to 15. But, God, do you really want to put your vote on the record when you know it's going to lose? What's the value to that?
I don't know that it ever gets to an actual vote. What I could see it getting to, though, is you could have members come out publicly and say, yeah, I back Sparks or whatever. I wonder how many, what number of those?
Recorded, Scott.
Say what?
But Scott, the vote for Speaker is recorded.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I don't think it gets to that.
So,
do you?
If I was there, I would make sure that the vote for Speaker is recorded so that you've got everybody on the record. Let the Democrats all vote no, and let the Republicans that are voting against him vote no too. I think that will happen, and I think there'll be 8 or 10 that are registered with the Democrats or no vote. Maybe that's probably what they'll do is a no vote.
Oh.
But the problem with that is, that's what I think you'll see. So I think it'd get to a vote in that context, not the one you were talking about. I agree. I don't see the caucus having a caucus and having to actually address this. I see it going to the floor and some members that join voting either present is my guess is, because I don't think they'd want to be on the record voting for the Democrat.
Yeah, that seems right to me.
Yeah.
So at what number do you think that becomes problematic for the incoming Speaker and his caucus? Is it 15? Is it 20? Where do you think, that's okay, there's some problems there?
I agree. If you get over 20, that would worry me.
Yeah.
Because I think if you've got a dozen or less, you can address them.
Because you have such a huge majority.
Yeah.
The truth is that huge majority it strengthens leadership and it weakens. With a 90-member majority, each member has some stroke. In 110 or 11, a lot of folks can go take a hike and you can still pass what you want.
Yeah, look, and I wanted to call out to Hannah and Casey and John Ratliff.
In Dallas?
We had a tough time building the House committee. But we had a lot of support with the Republicans because they were hungry to do what they did, and John Patterson and Alex Riley, but especially those operatives to do what they did with people tired of the majority, all the different stuff is monumental. And look, there was $50 million plus spent in an effort to take out the supermajorities, to reduce the Hawley pass abortion and pass the minimum wage. And the House and Senate committees came out on top. And I know that Drew Damp in the Senate, Cindy, et cetera, helped raise that late money against huge odds in the Senate, and were able to hold the Senate majority. Accolades to them as well, especially Drew.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. But let's take a look going forward here. If that House caucus wants to address Amendment 3, look, I think there'll be something on the ballot in 2 years, right? And there's probably some laws they could pass in the meantime to help restrain or box in Amendment 3. I watched people on my show, people that were pro Amendment 3, say, well, the legislature's going to have to pass some laws to fill in some of the gaps and set some of the policies. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. So I think the legislature will do that. That's listening to the people. They're keying on this quote from Patterson. I do think even the supporters of Amendment 3, I mean, Kelton could probably go back and find folks on the show that said, yeah, the legislature is going to have a role in this, in setting defining some of these terms. I think the legislature probably does that with gusto, and I think they probably put something else on the ballot in 2 years, right?
Yeah, look, I would admonish John Patterson, and I really like John, but he had no business really making that statement. Maybe he was pushed into it, but that statement as a speaker unnecessarily put him and his caucus in a bad position. You do have to look at the will of the people, but also you have to look at when you get language that's written that is not accurate, backed by $30 million of out-of-state money, you have to put some caution into what that actually means. And that is why we have elected officials. We have a representative democracy, allowing them that are better informed to make some decisions for us. With that being said, yeah, I do think you have to put something up. I would hope, and Scott, I think you know this, is that I'm a strategist, so my personal emotions, what I say on Trump or other things, are not necessarily how I feel personally. They're what strategically or what tactically I think is going to happen. Personally, I'm a devout pro-life. I'm adopted. My mom traveled over 1,000 miles to stay in a dorm for wayward women or whatever it was called at that point. Have me, give me up, go back. She was 15. And the sacrifice she had to make for that will always endear me to be pro-life and to be very strong about it. But I do think, and I do hope that the legislature, recognizes the fact that the kind of language that exceptions like on rape and incest, things like that they not over fear those things or be too Puritan on it. Because I think most Americans believe abortion is bad, but very few Americans are going to put their daughter or mother in jail for having one. And so I think that we cannot allow the rhetoric on the far left or far right to determine this issue. Missouri, under Roe v. Wade, was a state that had few, if any, abortions. And to that extent, I think we can enact laws that represent that without making it overly restrictive and painting a target, and inviting out state interests to come in and to try to get in the middle of our policy.
Well, but this was look, when folks wanted Roe versus Wade overturned, in Missouri, clearly that might not have been the best policy if you were pro-life, but folks wanted it overturned. This is what it looks like. The state of Missouri is going to have a few bites at the apple to decide what its policy on abortion is. I think it's clear it's going to be done at the ballot box, not the legislature primarily, but it's going to be a little sloppy. And I think, David, I guess, I'm a product of a teenage mother myself. I've always been pro-life too. I think the pro-life movement has been the most angry, dysfunctional group of people you'd ever see. That's very seldom even talks about abortion anymore. It's always these other things that are barely connected to abortion. Some would say not even at all. I think that, I guess my question is Mike Kehoe, he got involved, and he decided he was going to set up an organization to unite the pro-life movement. He got a great head of it in Cass Anderson. Is he going to continue that movement? Because you and I have seen this a lot. People get fed up with Missouri Right to Life, and they say we're going to start something new. And it has a mediocre year one, and then it doesn't have a year two. If the governor says this is where we're going, follow me, I think folks will follow him. Is he going to continue to go? Is it worth it to him to have that fight?
Look, I think I never never assume to speak for Mike Kehoe. He's capable of doing that on his own, but I do believe his heart